Today, we are going to look at the Tigers' offensive explosion and their victory on Thursday. Then we're going to take a look at some Matt Manning comments that were made before the game started. And then we'll end with a Spencer Turnbull player preview, all today on Locked On Tigers.
You are Locked On Tigers, your daily Detroit Tigers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, everybody? Welcome back to another edition of Locked On Tigers. I'm, of course, your host, Scott Bentley. Today is Friday, March 3rd, 2023. Thank you for making Locked On Tigers your first listen every single day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts, including YouTube, part of the Locked On Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel, the official sportsbook of Locked On. Make every moment more. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn today to get started. Alrighty, we have another jam-packed show for you. No shortage of news this time of year, and I truly love that. So today we're going to start with just talking about the big 10-3 victory over the Baltimore Orioles in spring training on Thursday. Brings the Tigers to a 500 record in spring, for whatever that's worth to you. For me personally, it's worth absolutely nothing, but I know some people still pay attention to wins and losses and stuff in spring. So we'll talk about that. Then we will talk about some comments that Matt Manning made on Thursday about his pitching development as well. Not going to spend like half an hour talking about it or anything, but it will definitely take up probably part of segment 2, and then we'll end the show with talking about my excitement for the return of Spencer Turnbull. Okay, so let's get right into it here. The biggest thing in this game, yet again, is a power surge. I'm pretty sure Chris McCoskey of the Detroit News tweeted out that the Tigers have like 15 home runs, I think was the number, 15 or 16. I think it's 15 homers in 6 spring training games. That is remarkable. Considering the lack of power last year, I think we are all very pleased and more than welcoming the power surge that has been happening so far. Now, obviously, it being done in spring is a lot different than it being done, at the beginning of April, but I think we will all gladly take it. Also, the names, I think, matter, and it's a lot of dudes that are, I don't want to say limbo, but a lot of the homers are coming from dudes that are competing and trying to make a name for themselves and honestly just trying to get on this major league roster. So let's start with Parker Meadows. Another home run in this one. He is having a fantastic spring, couple of homers and a double. It's also important to remember whatever he does at the plate is awesome, and that's obviously priority number 1 for the time being, but it's very important to remember that Parker Meadows may just be the fastest player in this entire organization. And that's something that I've been saying on here for years now, and it's cool to see him like he's on the 40-man, he's getting a legitimate look, and that's awesome. And it always was just, can the hitting develop? That's always what it was, and last year was obviously a huge step forward for him, one of the bigger storylines in the entire organization. And it's just awesome because he has so many other tools, right? If he can be a consistent, solid hitter, you're talking about a dude you can throw in center field and just watch him run wild out there. So, and like on the base paths, there was a play. I remember one of the first memories I have watching Parker Meadows was watching him in a West Michigan Whitecaps game. It might have even been Lakeland, but it was one of the two a couple of years ago. And watching him, he hit a like rollover ground ball to second base and still beat it out for an infield single. And I just remember being absolutely amazed. So you're talking about legitimate speed here. And that's something that is a lot more incentivized now at the major league level, and that this organization loves. Scott Harris and AJ Hinch love athletes that are, whether it leads to them being versatile players or just having athleticism in the field and on the base paths, even if it's only in one position. That's a win-win. So I guess this is kind of my long way of just saying, keep an eye on Parker Meadows. I still, if I had to give a 26-man roster projection today, it would not have Parker Meadows on it. However, he's certainly going to be one of the more highlighted and prominent players in Toledo if he doesn't make the roster out of camp. And I think, I mean, look, if Baddoo and Carpenter are both not having very good springs, and we get into, mid-late March, I think it's a lot more of a conversation than maybe people realize. I don't think there's any sure things really outside of maybe Riley Green and some of the pitchers. So something to keep an eye on for sure. Andre Lipsius with a home run. That's the dog. That's if you know me and you follow me, you're aware of my love for Andre Lipsius. I love dudes that walk. He draws walks with the best of them. He's an on-base percentage king, and I absolutely love it. He had another homer. That's already 2 homers in the spring for him. Again, not someone I think is a threat to make the roster, but they also put him at first to end the game, I think 2 days ago. So that's something. Maybe they're trying to work on his versatility, get him looks elsewhere, but really cool to see him hitting well. Yeah, I mean, like I said, just a crazy power surge. And another one in this game was Tyler Nevin, son of Phil. And his homer, they actually had a little bit of video on his, and his swing was really nice. He has some corner of the field versatility that I really like and appreciate. He's played corner outfield before. He's played both of the corner infield positions before. He played third base in this game, but also has experience at first. I don't know. I guess this is a natural transition to Torkelson, and then we can just kind of recap the whole situation. Torkelson had a very hard hit single, one of the hardest hit balls of the game, 105 miles an hour. But that hit was his first hit of the spring and makes him like 1 for 11 with 4 strikeouts, I believe, in spring training so far. And he has a couple of really hard hit balls, and he has 2 flyouts to the warning track, and one was a 415-foot flyout, and whatnot. And that's all very, very fair. And we're still very early on in spring. I'm not making any brash assumptions yet, but it's just worth noting as Nevin continues to hit, because he has hit before this homer as well. Look, I'm not saying that Tyler Nevin's going to be the opening day starting first baseman as of today. But if Torkelson is still really struggling in the spring, and maybe if it doesn't lead to Nevin being the starting first baseman, it might lead to this coaching staff having to have a discussion of, okay, Nevin's going to make this roster though, and that safety valve option at first base is going to live within Tyler Nevin. And I think that as he hits, that is going to become more and more prominent of a conversation. And at some point, it's going to start turning into like playing time in the regular season, who gets in more. But I think we're still, what are we? We've played 6 spring training games. I think we're still a little bit far away from me feeling comfortable having that conversation. But it's worth noting, Tyler Nevin hitting really well, showing off the versatility, played a few different positions, and Torkelson kind of picking up where he left off at the end of last season, relatively speaking. So something to keep an eye on for sure. The only other news and notes from the game are pitching. So Matt Boyd started this one, 2 innings, 2 hits, 1 earned run, 1 walk, and 4 strikeouts. The 1 run was a home run to Adley Rutschman, one of my favorite non-Tigers in the league. I love catchers, and that dude is unbelievable. What do you have, like a 6-win season as a rookie catcher? He's remarkable. I love him dearly. This stat line is just the most stereotypical Matthew Boyd stat line I've ever seen in my life. 4 strikeouts in 2 innings, but also gave up a home run. Rather on brand, to say the least. But I think that this is still a good sign. It's still spring, and the fact that he's already getting swings and misses and such is a great sign. Cody Stavenhagen of The Athletic said that his slider looked really good. Also, this game, not televised yet again. So all of this stuff I'm telling you from the pitching side of things is all either hearsay or data that was sent up north. But Stavenhagen said the slider looked good. He said it had a little more depth to him, so that's worth noting. And then the biggest thing was just, if you look at the data, I mean, he threw 10 sliders, and his CSW percentage, the stat that we love ever so dearly, called strikes plus whiffs, okay, was 90%. So 9 of his 10 sliders were either a called strike or a swinging miss strike. And that's I mean, objectively incredible. So something to I cannot wait to actually see him. I wish we could see with our eyes on the television screen spring training games, but that's something I've already complained about enough. Let's save the last piece for after the break, okay? Because the last one is actually there's a few more. I lied. I have a couple more observations that are not really seeing observations because they're not televised. And we'll get into those right after I tell y'all about our friends over at Built Bar. If you're looking for a delicious treat, but you don't want all the fat and calories, you have to try Built Bar. Okay. We're into March now. We're New Year's resolutions are behind us. You're not really thinking about them. You are either actively living them or they've gone by the wayside. And for me, I'm still trying to maintain my goal of eating healthier this year. And Built Bar has helped me do that a ton. Healthy is actually tasty with Built. Seriously, they're so delicious you won't even think they're good for you. They're perfect for that, still trying to eat healthy vibe that we're going for. What makes them so good? Well, for starters, they're covered in 100% real chocolate, and they come in unbelievable flavors like churro, peanut butter brownie, coconut almond, etc. I'm not sure how Bill does it, but these bars taste like candy bars while maintaining amazing macros. And what's even better is they're healthy, only 130 calories, 4 grams of sugar, and a whopping 17 grams of protein. Now, also, the biggest thing, you don't need to wait around to get a box. We've been talking about for years on this show how you need to go to built.com and order your Built Bars. You still can do that, but you can also go to your local Walmart and get a 4-bar box, or go to your local Sam's Club and get a 13-bar box. No longer do you have to wait around and wait for them to get shipped to you, or you still can. No matter how you acquire them, just get your hands on some Built Bars today. All right, everybody. Welcome back. Segment 2 here, Locked on Tigers. I appreciate y'all for tuning in. Thank you as always. So we are talking about some observations, which is kind of a loose term, from the spring training victory, the 10-3 victory over the Baltimore Orioles on a Thursday. The other pitching side of things, I have one more defensive thing I want to talk about later. But the last two on the pitching side of things, just really quickly, Garrett Hill pitched again in this one, and the sinker and the fastball were pretty fast yet again. That's something that we talked about in his debut. He was the first pitcher to pitch for the Tigers in spring training. He started game one, and he pumped like a 97-mile-an-hour sinker at one point, and everybody was like, what is happening? And in this game, the sinker and fastball both averaged about 94 miles an hour, which is well above what he was averaging velo-wise last season. And both of them topped out around 96 miles an hour yet again. So that's something that I think we're going to keep an eye on. And if the velo goes up like that for him when the stints are shorter, and that is like that for most pitchers, but if those pitches have really good shape and the command is solid, and you're getting consistent like mid or even like kind of pushing upper 90s type of velocity with pitches, if he's only throwing in 1 or 2 inning stints, I think that the conversation of Garrett Hill becoming a really solid multi-inning reliever is going to become more and more prevalent as the spring goes on, and kind of the conversation of Garrett Hill, the starter, might start going on to the back burner. And not that he can't become a starter long-term, and not that he will never start a game ever again, but I think that this bullpen is going to be full of like swing men that can either start if you really need them to, or throw 3 innings to kind of bridge a short start to the back end of the bullpen. I think that this coaching staff loves that type of pitcher. I think that this front office loves that type of pitcher. And I think if Garrett Hill is consistently topping out at 96 miles an hour with 2 different pitches, that's going to kind of make that decision a lot easier. I'm starting to separate Garrett Hill from like the Brisky Wentz conversation and more into a conversation of his own in my head of like, this dude might just be a really solid, 2-ish inning reliever. So something else that's noteworthy for sure. And then the last one is Brennan White, the slider. It was talked about by a lot of beat writers. At one point, it reached almost 3,000 RPMs. That's very spinny, very, very spinny pitch. And he had a pretty solid outing again. I really want him to pitch in a televised baseball game because I'm a huge fan of his. And I literally just haven't been able to, I mean, I saw him in the minors last year a lot, but I want to see him pitch in a spring training game that's televised. I just want to see him pitch and see how he looks. I'm tired of hearing how he looks from other people. So that's kind of frustrating. But He's apparently looked really solid so far. The velocity on the fastball looks good too, and his results and his stats are pretty solid so far as well. So another guy I think is a real dark horse to kind of make this bullpen out of camp. I really like Brennan White a lot, and you're starting to see why they protected him and put him on the 40-man roster. Only other one is Mario Feliciano played some first base, which I thought was worth noting. Naturally, a catcher in the past, but Lipsius played first, etc. So they're trying some people out there at first base, which I regardless of results at the plate, I think is worth talking about. Okay, that's all I got for the observations from yesterday's spring training game. Let's talk about Matt Manning really quick, and then we'll end the show talking about Spencer Turnbull. Okay, so this is, again, I don't want to spend like 15, 20 minutes on this because I think we're all pretty much on the same page here. This needed to be spoken about. This quote, I'm going to read it from Evan Petzold, but a few other of the Freep, but a few other beat writers also tweeted out the same quotes. So it's from everybody. It sounds like Manning was just kind of talking to the media. The quote is, I wish in the minor leagues they would have told me more. Just like go out and throw 50% curveballs. We don't care what happens, but you got to work on your curveball. Manning then said, quote, instead, I knew I could beat minor leaguers with my fastball, so that's all I did. Once I got to AAA and the big leagues, I just couldn't throw the fastball. I had to work on things. I felt behind in that sense, but I'm learning and getting better. Manning then ended by saying the communication back then was like, quote, if you want to go to the next level, pitch well, end quote. Pitching well was having a low ERA. So I was like, why would I throw anything else until I know they can beat my fastball? I would throw that 70 times a game. Well, that's infuriating, right? I mean, we can just call it what it is. I mean, that's infuriating. Now, it doesn't do any good to be super upset, really, on March 3rd, 2023, because this is very much talking about the previous regime. Matt Manning was in AAA in 2021 when Hinch and Fetter came in for their first seasons, and Hinch kind of revamped a lot of the coaching staffs and some of the front office personnel as well. But Hinch, again, the coaching staffs below the majors were not completely flipped, but a lot of changes happened immediately when that change happened. And then obviously Matt Manning got called up in the middle of 2021, and then he was working with Fetter. So it doesn't really do any good to talk about the development or complain too much about the development in the Avila regime, because that, like none of those people that were along the journey that he's talking about here that just told him, if you want to pitch at the next level, have a low ERA and that's it. None of those people are likely around anymore. I can actually almost promise you none of those people are around anymore as far as development goes. So just wanted to bring it up and wanted all of us to get one last, just like, let's scream about it. And like, that's infuriating. And I can't believe that a regime and a front office and a development staff that's entire job is dedicated to putting players in the best situation and trying to make them better was just like, if you have a low ERA, that's all we care about. Like, what are we doing? I guess we're not doing anymore. That's again, that's why we're not talking a ton about it, because it doesn't do any good. And the development took huge strides last year, and we've talked about it a ton this offseason. We've talked about how the development on the pitching side of things has gotten a lot better in the last couple of years. We've talked about how the development on the hitting side of things last season took major steps forward. And as Scott Harris came in, he even made more changes than Hinch already has made in the last 2 years as far as development goes. And we're seeing a lot of those changes, and it steps in the right direction. But it sucks to hear. Even though it's not going to hurt you anymore, it still sucks to hear. And it's mind-boggling. Like, it's genuinely stunning. I'm blown away that a Major League Baseball team's development staff, like, that was their advice, was just Do whatever you got to do to have a low ERA, man. I don't know. There's so much more, obviously, as we all know, to pitching than that. And look, it sounds like he said that he was trending rather in the right direction. And I have full faith in Chris Fetter and I mean Lund. That sounds like a great addition. I have full faith in this coaching staff. I really do think that it's tough to see because the roster and the talent level on the roster has been so low for so long. I genuinely think that this coaching staff is one of the better coaching staffs out there. So I'm really glad that Manning is in the majors now and a part of a great staff, and it's only going to go up from here, hopefully. It's just for those prime development years to be hindered by people that just didn't tell him anything other than do whatever you got to do to have a low ERA is just ugh. Oh, that's infuriating. It really does make you upset, don't it? All right, but that's enough. We're as I said, we're moving on. That regime is not here anymore, and let's talk about the 2023 season, okay? And with that, we'll talk about Spencer Turnbull, one of my favorite players, certainly one of my favorite pitchers on this roster. I love watching him play the game, and I can't wait to talk about why I love watching him play the game so much. We'll do that right after I tell y'all about our friends over at FanDuel. It's the midway point of the NBA season, and here is the perfect time. Now, rather, is the perfect time to download the FanDuel Sportsbook app, America's #1 sportsbook, because new customers get a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000. That's bonus bets back if your first bet doesn't win. Just download the FanDuel Sportsbook app. It's safe, it's secure, it's super easy to use. Then you can bet on everything from the money line, point scores, threes drained, etc. Plus, FanDuel even lets you combine your bets for a bigger chance at a payout with a same-game parlay. It's awesome, so don't miss your chance to get your no-sweat first bet up to $1,000 in bonus bets when you go to FanDuel.com/LockedOn. That's FanDuel.com/LockedOn to learn more. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sports betting partner of the NBA. All right, everybody. Welcome back. Third and final segment here, Locked On Tigers. We are talking Spencer Turnbull. I have been ready for this conversation for so long. Red Bull is back. He gives you wings, and he is back. I'm ecstatic to watch Spencer Turnbull take the mound again in a regular season baseball game. I cannot wait for April just to see Spencer Turnbull again. And he is making his debut on Saturday, his spring training debut. He's currently slated for Saturday. Those are pretty fluid, but currently set to make his spring training debut then. So I figured we'd do this before his debut so we can just talk about what to expect from him this season. Look, 2021 was so also frustrating, I guess. It really broke my heart to see him get hurt because as I said, I'm such a huge fan of watching him pitch. And I felt like he finally all was starting to put it together, and his numbers were fantastic. And then the no-hitter, and then everybody was finally like put on the map, like take note that this stuff that people like myself and other analysts in the Tigers community finally were like, see, like we told you, like we've been telling you since he was in the minor leagues, and finally like everybody is seeing how good this dude can be. And then Tommy John, and it just kind of sucked. So in 2021, before the injury, in 50 innings pitched, he had a 2.88 ERA. His projective stats were 2.95 FIP, xERA of 3.01, so all around there. 1.5 WAR is kind of weird for pitchers, but 2.88 ERA, a 7.92 K per nine, and a 2.16 walk per nine. That was in 9 starts as well. One of the biggest things with him has always been the command. He's always had arguably some of the best stuff in the entire organization. That's something that I've been saying for years now. I think his stuff is right up there. You know, in the top prospects we're coming up, and Mize, Manning, Skubal, and whatnot. And it's like Spencer Turnbull might have just pure stuff, it might be better than any of these dudes. Like him and Scooble are really like toe to toe in that regard for me. That's how highly I think of the movement and just the type of his repertoire. Like he is so nasty, but it's always just been about command. Sometimes he fell into some slippery slopes where he would just lose command in a hurry and it would really get away from him. And then you look up and he'd have 2-3 walks in an inning and he'd be trying to dig himself out of it. But in 2021, he finally started to look like he was ironing that out. And it was just, again, it was so frustrating to see that cut short. But if you look at the walk percentage by year, his very first year, 2018, technically, he only pitched in 16 innings. So that doesn't really count. But in 2019, in 148 innings, he had a 9% walk rate. Then in 2020, the shortened season, so that's 56 and 2/3 innings pitched. He had a 12% walk rate. And then in 50 innings in 2021, he had a 6% walk rate. The MLB average from year to year is usually around 8 to 8.5%. It's usually somewhere in that area. So went from having well above, I mean, in 2020, but really throughout his career, just having like comfortably above a league average walk rate to comfortably below a league average walk rate in the first 2 months of 2021. And that was a really good sign to see before the injury. Obviously, the no-hitter in there was one of the best. He had a walk in that game, obviously, but a really good display of that. His repertoire, again, this is all pre-injury. We'll see what happens this year, if any of this has changed or if any adjustments have been made. But in 2021, he featured a four-seam fastball that he threw 35% of the time, a slider he threw 24.5% of the time, a sinker he threw 22% of the time, then a curveball and a changeup he both threw 7.5% of the time, and then a cutter that he threw like 30 or 40 times all year, about 3% of the time. The biggest thing with that, look how many pitches he has. He's so good. He's so good. I cannot wait to watch him pitch again. But the one of the biggest things that you notice from so up to that point in his career, then a big change that happened in 2021 was there was about a 10% drop off in his four-seam fastball usage in the 50 innings in 2021. Went from pretty consistently throwing it like 45, 46% of the time down to 35 and let his secondary stuff go up. And it's very rare that you see someone throw the fastball less and then see their walk numbers go down. And that was just such an awesome sign. Again, I'm going to say it a million times, but it was so sad to see his season get cut short like that. So that's something I'll look for. Where are we going to revert back to? Okay, first season back, maybe early on, just to like get his sea legs back under him. He's throwing the fastball a lot more again. Or are we just going to jump right back into what, like that healthy mix of 3 pitches over 22% of the time? So that's something we'll look for early on. And the thing is, like, his fastball is lethal. Like, it's a very spinny fastball, which can have either actually a lot of movement or at least the illusion of a lot of movement. In 2021, had a run value of -4. But one of the craziest things ever was his four-seam fastball had a run value of -17 in 2019. That is remarkable. Obviously, for pitchers, you want to be negative, and for hitters, you want to be positive. -17 run value for a pitch he was throwing like 45% of the time in 2019. Just the sequencing is so big for him because he has so many pitches in his repertoire, in his arsenal. He can fool you so many different ways. And I think that four-seam fastball, I'm kind of just going to trust him and Fetter with it. Like, if it's such a valuable pitch, it's so good. If no matter how much he's throwing it, I'm pretty pumped about how it looks. It's only league average-ish, like 44-ish miles an hour, 45 at best, velo-wise. But when sequenced correctly, it's a really lethal pitch, and he does that great. The slider, really solid pitch throughout his career as well. Ton of movement on it. I love watching his slider. And then the changeup has, in 2021, that was another big part for development. His changeup moves way more than the league average changeup. Like, if you're just looking at inches of drop, way, way more than league average. And that's, can only be a good thing if you can command it relatively well. So really good in that regard as well. Another thing in there, we're talking about how nasty his stuff is and how he has the ability, his strikeout numbers, they weren't remarkable. I mean, around an 8K per nine most years, between 8 and 9. I mean, even in 2021, before the injury, it was actually just a hair below 8, and his career number is about 8.5. So, wasn't getting a boatload of strikeouts, even though he has the ability to get swings and misses. He has a couple of pitches that have whiff rates in the mid 30s, and he has the ability to get strikeouts. Obviously, it's not a bad number, but I think the more under the radar thing with him is his pitches move so much, and he's really under the radar, underrated at getting ground balls and weak contact, and that's something that he did really well pre-injury as well. Had a ground ball rate over 50%. That's 6% better than league average. I mean, he can get you a ton of different ways. If he needs a ground ball, he's going to go to the sinker. He can get a double play, and if he needs a strikeout, if there's a man on third and whatnot, he can try to use his stuff to get you to swing and miss. He has the ability to be so good, and I'm so pumped that he's back. And just looking at his splits last year, there's not on the road he was way worse than at home, or lefties crushed him and righties didn't, and he just faced more righties, so it didn't look as good. And he was just great against everybody. Lefties, righties, home, road, any split you look at, runners in scoring position, nobody on. It was just really solid numbers. And again, it's 50 innings, and I'm not trying to make it sound like this dude's going to go out there and win the Cy Young this year. Again, at the end of the day, his K per nine was around 8. There's still some room to improve, and there's still some command stuff he has to reprove, and he's got to just reprove that he's the same pitcher he was before, and that his movement hasn't changed, and that his stuff is still as good, and his velocity is still as good. I'm not looking for an unbelievable sub-3 ERA season, 200 innings pitched or whatever from Spencer Turnbull this year. Okay. I'm passionate about how good I think he can be. I don't want that to get misconstrued as this dude's trying to convince me that Spencer Turnbull is about to win the Cy Young this year. Okay. That all being said, I am very excited to see him. Am I expecting 200 innings pitched? No. I think the biggest thing for him this year for me is just stay on the field, man. More so than anything. Just stay healthy. Please just stay healthy. Keep that elbow healthy. And like I said, I'm not expecting 200 innings his first season back from Tommy John, but with no restrictions already, it sounds like the restrictions and the limitations are kind of already being lifted off of him, which is a great sign. So I'd love to see him get into that 120 to 140 innings pitched range. That's where he was in 2019. I think he was about 140 innings pitched that year. So if he can just get back into, approaching that 150 mark as close as they're comfortable letting him get to that, I would be thrilled. That puts him up and revamped and up to the usage that he was before the injury and before the shortened COVID season. And then next year, hopefully we can just truly take the leash off and just let him go as many innings as he's comfortable. Okay, so that's the biggest thing. Can't wait to watch him pitch again. Think that he has incredible stuff. Such a big fan of Spencer Turnbull, the pitcher. I can't wait. I can't wait to watch him pitch again. Okay, I think that's all I got for you. Thanks for making Locked On Tigers your first listen every day, as always. And now for your second listen, check on the Locked On Fantasy Baseball podcast. Win your league by listening to Matt and Dom every day as they bring you the best fantasy draft strategies. Find Locked On Fantasy Baseball wherever you get your podcast and on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Okay, I think that's it. Yeah, the biggest thing, stay healthy and command, right? I mean, he hasn't pitched in almost 2 years. By the time April rolls around, it will literally almost have been 2 full years since he has pitched. So I think there's probably going to be some adjustments that need to be made for command, and there will probably be a couple of starts where people will go what's up with your boy over there? He's walking a ton of people and having trouble with command. I'm sure there will be some starts like that. I'm sure it may take some time to get kind of his sea legs back under him. But at the end of the day, it's really hard to teach stuff. And so I think that I'm just excited to see him back on a major league mound in the regular season. I'm pumped. All right. I appreciate y'all. Thank you all for tuning in. Thank you for the continued support of the show. It means the world to me. We will be back on Monday. Everybody have a fantastic weekend. I think over the weekend, it's either over the weekend or right when we get back from the weekend that some players will start heading to the WBC. So we'll have some openings, some more opportunities for some more kids to play. That's super exciting always in the spring. So, yeah, we'll be here to talk about it. All right. All right. Have a fantastic weekend. I appreciate y'all. Peace and love. Going to therapy's dope. And I'll catch y'all on Monday, baby. Go Tigers.